How much do you need to retire? This is one of the most searched questions on Google. But the irony is that there is no answer to this question because it's impossible for us to know what the future holds. How long will we live? What is going to happen in the markets? How much money will we need? And all these unanswered questions create so much uncertainty that they can leave you paralyzed by fear. A fear which keeps you working much longer than you need to. But there is a solution to this uncertainty, and that solution is flexibility. Accept the fact that you'll never be able to plan for everything and build flexibility in your plan to react to whatever life throws at you. So in this video, I'm going to show you how flexibility can help you achieve a much higher, more sustainable retirement income than you would have ever thought possible. And I'm also going to show you how I give my clients the confidence to take that step and retire as soon as they are able. Hello and welcome back to the channel. For anyone new here, hi, my name is James. I'm a financial planner, and this is a place where you can learn to make smarter financial decisions. I spend most of my time working with people that are on the cusp of retirement. They know that they want to slow down with work or maybe retire full stop, but they're uncertain of the future. How much income can their assets sustain? And how much would they need? What happens if the stock market crashes? All of these uncertainties instill a sense of fear, which prevents them from making a decision, and they just end up kicking the can down the road until that choice is taken away from them by their employer or ill health. Over the last few videos, I've been trying to help you break through this fear or prepare yourself for when that time comes so that this does not happen to you. So far, we've looked at why it's so important to make that decision and retire as soon as you are able, and how important it is to start from the bottom and really work out how much income you would need to sustain your quality of life. And the next step in this series is to work out how large an asset pool you might need to sustain that desired level of income. And that's what we're going to be looking at today. How can you create a sustainable income that maximizes the amount you can draw and gives you the confidence that you can handle whatever life throws at you? And I'm also going to show you why the 4% rule that you may have heard of is total bullshit. So let's start by building a plan and seeing what happens. Let's say we have a couple, Ben and Alice, who are both 55 years old, each of whom have £300,000 in private defined contribution pensions. And they've also got £50,000 in cash, bringing their total assets to £650,000. And let's also say that within their pensions, they were invested in a diversified portfolio of 50% stocks and 50% bonds. Now, they've said that they think to sustain their desired quality of life in retirement, it's going to cost them around about £40,000 a year. So that's £40,000, but increasing by inflation each year so that it maintains its purchasing power. Now, 40k a year is 6.2% of their total 650k pot. That's almost 60% more income than the 4% rule would suggest that they can take. But this is what we're going to be testing. Now, what I've done is built this plan in some software called Timeline that I use to help clients stress test their retirement plan. So what this software is going to do is it's going to look back at the economic data over the last 115 years and see how this plan would have held up if we had started it at any point in time between now and then. And if we run this test with the plan as it is right now, you can see that in only 6% of those periods would this plan have held up. So in 94% of the other scenarios, this plan would have run out of money before Alice and Ben had reached the age of 95 years old. Now, it might be easier to appreciate what's going on from this particular graph. This graph shows us the maximum sustainable income that could have been drawn during each of these periods. So you can see that it starts in 1915 and goes all the way up to 1980 because this is the last starting date that can run for the full 40 years of the plan. And you can see that if we were starting this plan in 1921, we would have been able to sustainably draw £53,000 worth of income each year. But if we started in 1961, we would only have been able to draw £19,000. And if we go back to the original graph, just to explain this in a little bit more detail, the thick blue line in the middle is the average scenario, so it's the median. And we can see how the value of our assets would have changed over time if we had been following this particular scenario. So in this scenario, we would have run out of money at age 74. Now, the next dark blue area represents the scenarios between the 75th and 25th percentiles. So this is the 50% of scenarios that fit to immediately above and below that average. And this last area that's highlighted represents all the scenarios between the 90th and the 10th percentile. So this is 80% of all of the different possible starting periods. Their results would have fallen between these two lines. So what we're seeing here is that drawing a 40k income each year is clearly not going to be very sustainable unless we're very lucky. But I'm going to show you how we can make this plan work. By being flexible and pulling certain levers, we can make this work. Firstly, starting with risk. First, let's see what happens if we increase the risk of the portfolios inside the pensions from 50% stocks to 100% stocks. Now, immediately we're up to a 27% success rate, which means that more of our scenarios are lasting the distance. And you can see that now the median scenario is now running out of money at age 80. So what we're seeing is that if we increase the risk of our portfolio by upping our equity allocation, we're actually reducing the risk of running out of money. I know this sounds counterintuitive, but it's true. If you have high income needs, you will need more growth to achieve them. But saying that, please don't go away and start cranking up the risk of your portfolios, because this only works if you put the right protections in place. And I'm going to need to dedicate a whole video to explain exactly what you need to do to make this work. But you get the premise. Higher risk can increase the sustainability of a portfolio if done correctly. Right now, this is not a very realistic plan. So we're going to have to add a couple more things to this to make it more realistic. Firstly, we're probably not going to carry on spending 40k a year for the rest of their lives. I mean, at 95 years old, we'll probably just be happy with a daily cup of tea and an annual visit from our grandchildren. So let's say that at 75, Ben and Alice's spending drops by 25%. So it drops from 40k a year to 30k a year. And they're also going to have state pensions that will kick in at 67. So let's say that Ben has a full state pension of £9,000 a year and Alice has half, so £4,500 a year. So now, after having been much more realistic with our future cash flows, we're seeing success in 61% of these scenarios, with the average scenario now leaving us with £600,000 of excess. And in 25% of these scenarios, we're actually ending up with over £1 million at the age of 95. To be clear, inflation has been taken into consideration. So that's £1 million in today's money. But that still leaves us with a 33% chance of running out of money, which for most of my clients isn't really good enough. So now we're going to have to get really flexible. In this plan, we're invested in 100% stocks. And although long-term stock market returns are very predictable, short-term returns are not. And if we get a few bad years right after we retire and we keep drawing that 40k a year, we're going to rapidly eat into our assets. This is known as sequencing risk, whereby if a retiree sees a crash, stock market crash immediately after they retire, it can drastically affect the survivability of their portfolio. And what you'll find is that in all of the scenarios here that ran out of money, they will have experienced bad returns right at the start of retirement at that particularly vulnerable period. So this is the thing. If your retirement savings are invested in the stock market, you should not expect to take out the same level of income each year. You should expect to have to be tactical with the amount that you withdraw depending on what is happening in the market. Now, if you don't feel comfortable with this and you want the security that comes with having a fixed income that never changes other than rising with inflation, then you might be better off just buying an annuity. But right now, the rates on these types of annuities can be as low as 2%, which is why many people are now seeking out higher returns available in the stock market. But stock market returns are variable. So you should expect to draw a variable income. In this plan, we start off drawing out 40k a year, which is then adjusted each year in line with inflation. In 61% of those scenarios, we would have been fine, but in 31%, we wouldn't have. So to get to a higher percentage of success, we're going to have to build more flexibility into our plan so that if we do see bad returns straight away, right after we retire, we're going to have to tactically reduce the amount of income that we take. But this presents us with another problem. How are you going to decide how much to reduce your income by and when? As you know, it's almost impossible to time the market when you're putting money into it. Well, it's the same when you're trying to take money out of it, and trying to second guess the markets to create a retirement income will leave you with a lot of stress, and it's probably going to drive you mad. So we need to come up with a system that we decide on before we start our plan so that we can systematically react to whatever happens in the markets without letting whatever we're reading in the news or our emotions get in the way of our decision making. One solution is that we could simply choose to take the same percentage amount out of our portfolio each year, which means that we would technically never run out of money. But this would leave you with a lot of volatility in your yearly income. And when the markets are going up, you're going to end up with a lot more income than you need. And when the stock market is falling, you're going to end up with a lot less than you need. What would be better is if we can find a set of rules that we can follow that enables us to make moderate adjustments depending on what is happening in the market. Now, there are a lot of very well-proven and well-researched strategies that you can use and follow to help you do this. And I'll probably need to dedicate a whole video to going through all of them. But in this plan, we're going to follow a Guardrails strategy that was developed by Jonathan Guyton and William Linger in a 2006 study. I don't have time to cover this strategy in detail, but I have left a link to the paper down in the description if you want to have a read of that yourself. But in principle, it looks to moderate the levels of income that we draw by putting a cap on the level of income that we can draw during good years and a floor on the level of income that we can draw during bad years. And if we implement this strategy, bam, you can see that we get a 95% success rate, where the majority of scenarios are leaving us with more money than when we started. By following this guardrail strategy, your income will increase if you get lucky at the start of retirement and get good returns. But if the markets do crash, it will systematically reduce your income to help it remain sustainable without modifying it too drastically. So what this is telling us is that if we were to implement this plan using this guardrail strategy and start it at any point in time over the last 115 years, we would have had a 95% chance of not running out of money, which is pretty damn good. But there is still one last lever that we could pull to make this even better. In that, if you really needed to, you could do some part-time work. And if we modeled that instead of James retiring straight away at 55, he actually does some part-time work from the age of 55 to 65, earning just £4,000 a year, bam, we get our magic number. And by the way, 99% is the highest that this metric goes. When you first retire, you have no idea of whether you're going to be lucky or not. You have no idea what life is going to throw at you. And this uncertainty can drive you mad. But when you start to understand that if things don't go your way, there are these levers that you can pull to keep you on track. And the knowledge that you have this flexibility helps you to cope with that uncertainty. Now imagine for a second that this is your plan. You're 55 years old and you're nervous about retiring. You don't know whether you've got enough. You're nervous about what's going to happen in the markets, as many of you are right now. And then I show you this. This plan that has been stress tested against every single market condition over the last 115 years, including the Great Depression of the 1930s and the high inflation environment of the 1970s. And in all of those conditions, you would have been fine. Not only would you have been fine, but in most of them, you would have ended up with more money than you would have ever needed. Do you think that seeing this data would give you the confidence you need to take that step? I really hope so. Guys, if you haven't seen them already, I would highly encourage you to watch the first 2 videos in this series, starting with this video here, which explores why it's so important that you take that step and retire as soon as you are able. I'll see you there.